Entire neighborhoods were swallowed by floodwaters. Bridges snapped like twigs. Hillsides gave way, crashing down on homes already drowning in mud. In mid-July 2025, parts of Sichuan and Chongqing were hit with 5 straight days of extreme weather, relentless rain, hailstorms, landslides, and some of the most destructive flooding China has seen in years. Towns were cut off from the outside world, roads vanished, power grids collapsed, and across this chaos, families were left to fend for themselves, searching for loved ones or trying to survive without food, water, or shelter. This wasn't just a storm, it was a full-blown humanitarian crisis. You may have come across reports claiming over 11 million people were affected, with 172 dead and more than 60 still missing, just in the Sichuan and Chongqing regions. However, those numbers haven't been independently verified by mainstream global outlets like Reuters, CBS News, or Al Jazeera. That doesn't mean the situation wasn't serious. It was. But it does mean we need to rely on verified data for clarity. What we do know, confirmed by credible sources such as Reuters and Earth.org, is that between 23 to 25 million people across China were affected by natural disasters in the first half of 2025 alone. In terms of financial impact, national-level economic losses have already surpassed 54 billion yuan, which translates to roughly 7.5 to 7.6 billion USD. While the situation in Sichuan and Chongqing was severe, we're still waiting for a more granular, province-level breakdown from official sources. Let's talk about the people behind those numbers. Some early regional estimates reported dozens of deaths and many missing in southwestern provinces, but these have not been independently confirmed. However, we do have verified incidents that highlight just how dire things became. For example, in Yibin's Sichuan, over 6,000 residents had to be evacuated due to rising floodwaters and the risk of landslides. In Jiaotong, more than 7,000 were relocated for similar reasons. And in Tianchuan County, a deadly landslide killed 3 people and left 2 more missing. These are just a few examples, and they serve as stark reminders that behind every statistic is a real person, a family, a life disrupted or lost. The destruction went far beyond homes and human loss. Agriculture was devastated too. Although exact figures for Sichuan aren't confirmed, national reports show that around 2.18 million hectares of farmland were impacted across China in just the first half of 2025. These numbers, confirmed by Reuters and Earth.org, paint a grim picture. Crops were drowned or swept away, threatening not only local farmers' livelihoods, but also regional food stability. The ripple effect? Higher food prices, reduced availability, and a looming question mark over long-term food security. This isn't just a local disaster, it's a crisis with consequences for millions across the country, stretching from market shelves to dinner tables in cities far from the floods. Infrastructure didn't fare much better. Roads disappeared beneath floods, bridges collapsed or became unstable, power lines were down, and entire communities lost access to mobile networks and emergency communication systems. In cities like Yibin and Jiaotong, rescue efforts were complicated by the fact that helicopters couldn't even fly safely. Emergency teams had to hike through mud or use boats to reach isolated communities. Thousands of responders, from armed police to local volunteers, risked their lives navigating dangerous terrain just to provide basic aid. The physical geography of these regions, steep mountain valleys and narrow rivers, made everything more difficult. Medical teams were working around the clock. Though some reports about Kaohsiung County, like the deployment of 200 doctors and mobile clinics, aren't yet verified, one thing is clear: emergency medical units were sent in quickly to prevent disease outbreaks, especially those caused by contaminated water. Floods often trigger a second crisis, waterborne illness, and this was no exception. Disinfection efforts were launched and medical staff focused on first aid, clean water access, and distributing essential medicines. In chaotic conditions, the priority was clear: keep survivors alive and stop any secondary health crises before they could spiral out of control. The medical response became a race against time and bacteria. Financially, the central and local governments did mobilize relief efforts, including evacuations and restoration of basic infrastructure. However, specific figures such as 40 million yuan from the central government, 12 million by Chongqing, and 15 million by Daju are not yet confirmed by accessible sources. What is clear is that recovery is underway, but in mountainous regions with limited access and unstable ground, it will be a slow and complex process. Meanwhile, insurance providers have started processing claims for damaged homes, vehicles, and businesses. Some small business owners have reportedly received temporary tax relief, and national ministries like Civil Affairs and Natural Resources are working with local governments to coordinate rebuilding efforts. But talk to residents and the sentiment is clear: short-term help is appreciated, but long-term resilience is what's really needed. Unfortunately, the crisis might not be over yet. New weather alerts have already been issued for the same areas, warning of continued rainfall. When the ground is already saturated, even moderate rain can trigger landslides and flash floods. In several neighborhoods across Chongqing, public safety vehicles are broadcasting messages via loudspeakers urging residents to avoid unstable structures and to report cracks in the ground or tilted utility poles.
Amid
the devastation, there's also been an outpouring of community support. Volunteers from other provinces arrived with bottled water, food, medicine, and warm blankets. In Kaohsiung and beyond, local residents took matters into their own hands, organizing cleanup crews, checking on elderly neighbors, sharing supplies. Some shops have even reopened, and children have returned to school in less affected areas. The pace is slow, but life is inching forward. This disaster also raises larger questions. Are events like this becoming more common? Climate scientists say yes. Rising global temperatures mean more moisture in the atmosphere, which results in stronger storms and heavier rainfall. China's Deputy Flood Control Director, Zhang Zhitong, stressed the urgent need for better early warning systems, stronger flood defenses, and more resilient urban planning. Poor construction near rivers, deforestation, and the placement of certain dams may have amplified the destruction in this case. As recovery continues, there's also a growing push to rethink the way infrastructure is designed and where people are allowed to build. So as the media coverage begins to fade, the rebuilding continues. It's going to take months, possibly years, to restore normalcy in many of the hardest hit areas. But it's also an opportunity to build smarter, to improve response systems, and to support the communities that bear the brunt of our changing climate. That's a wrap for today's video. But the story doesn't end here. It leaves us with questions that need answering. What will it take for disaster-prone regions like Sichuan and Chongqing to build truly resilient infrastructure? Are short-term relief efforts enough when climate-driven disasters are happening more often? And most importantly, are governments, communities, and even we as individuals doing enough to prepare for what's coming next? If this report gave you insight into something the headlines overlook, don't scroll past. Subscribe for more in-depth stories that connect the dots between disaster and decision. Hit like to help more people see what's unfolding, and tell us what you think, because your voice might be part of the solution we're all waiting for. Stay aware, stay connected, and stay hopeful, even when the rain keeps falling.